Join me today as we take a look at how I painted some amazing KNIL samples which I was sent from the fantastic team at May 40 Miniatures. These 28mm models represent the troops of the Dutch East Indies Army, and it's something that I've really wanted to paint for a long while now. Be sure to drop me a comment at the end of the video if you found this tutorial useful. The Japanese invasion of the Dutch East Indies was a military campaign by the Empire of Japan to capture the colony of the Netherlands in Southeast Asia during World War II. It started on the 10th of January 1942 and ended on the 8th of March 1942 with the surrender of the Dutch forces. The Japanese wanted to secure the oil and rubber resources of the colony for their war effort. The invasion was part of the Pacific War and involved land, sea and air battles between the Japanese and the Allied forces of the Netherlands, Britain, Australia and the United States, otherwise known as ABDACOM. The Dutch resistance against the Japanese occupation of the Dutch East Indies was mainly carried out by the Royal Netherlands Navy, the Royal Netherlands-Indies Army and various underground groups. The Dutch Navy fought in several naval battles with the Japanese, but their surface vessels suffered heavy losses. Underwater, the Dutch submarines were far more effective, and the Admiral of the Royal Netherlands Navy, Conrad Helfrich, was given the name Ship-a-Day because of it. The Dutch army tried to defend the colony from the Japanese invasion, but was outnumbered and outgunned. The Dutch army put up more of a fight on the island of Java, but it was all in vain. The underground groups and those elements of the army that went into the mountains to engage in guerrilla warfare carried out sabotage, espionage and propaganda activities which helped the Allied forces in some areas. The resistance was ultimately unsuccessful and the Dutch East Indies fell under Japanese control in March 1942. So that's just a little bit of a brief background as to who the Dutch Indies are, what it is as a colony and what happened in the Second World War. It's a colony that really doesn't get much of a mention in most history books, but yeah, they played quite a crucial role in trying to stop the Japanese advance. So May 40 have come out with a fantastic Kickstarter to represent those that fought in that conflict against the Japanese. Unfortunately, that Kickstarter has now ended. But fortunately, you will be able to get these miniatures later on once they get released to their website after they've given the pledges their miniatures. So as you can see here, they've got a huge range of Dutch East Indies miniatures that are going to be hitting their website, May 40 Miniatures, at some point. For those that have pledged already, we are going to have the option to add on to our pledges for some of the more unique stuff. Like the medics and the communications teams, etc, etc. Now, if you do like the sculpts that you see in the video today, May 40 have a range of Dutch, so they're in their native country of Holland. They also have some Fallschirmjäger, which are early war, so it's again meant to show those that are fighting the Dutch, and also some early SS. Now, painting Dutch East Indies, or KNIL, infantry is really tricky. It's really tricky to get the uniform correct, in my opinion. I went for about 5 different types of paints to get this right. So yeah, it's really tricky, but there's a few different resources that we can go to, and the best one is this Facebook group. Now, I'm not going to be able to translate any of this for you, and I can't even pronounce what the Facebook group is called, but there is tons of pictures on there, and they focus purely on the Dutch East Indies, which is just superb. So yeah, really good resource. I'll leave a link to that Facebook group in the description. So to start off with, I go Russia Uniform World War II and German Camo Bright Green at a 2:1 ratio. Now, I experimented with about 5 different paints to get this green looking the way I wanted it to for the uniform. I used different greens. Some were really bright, some were really dark, and it just didn't sit well with me. I really didn't like the look of what the green looked like. When you look at the historical pictures, it's not like your normal drab that you would see, and it's also not super bright. It does look quite bright, but it's not cartoony bright, which is what a lot of paints are coming out to be like when I was testing them, at least anyway. So this is the mixture that I've come with. You may disagree with it, you may think that it's a bit overkill, but it's worth it in my opinion. I think it really captures the uniform nicely. Then we move on to the gaiters. and I'm painting those in brown violet. You could also get away with painting those in khaki from what I've seen. I could be wrong, so definitely use that Facebook page as reference, and obviously other images on Google that you can find. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking is probably going to be the best color. Also, they've got some sort of, I believe it's like a gas mask bag or something on the front there that can be painted in brown violet. My first miniature, I painted it in like a brown color, which is historically inaccurate, so you definitely want to paint that in the brown violet as well. Then moving on, I'm painting the bag and that like cylinder that's on the back, which I believe is also just some sort of container, in green grey. Now you have to bear with me because I really don't know much of the equipment of the Dutch East Indies. It's something that I'm interested in for sure. I really want to do it in 20mm, so to get it in 28mm is fantastic, but I really know very little about them in terms of their equipment, so I'm believing that's what it is. And then for the water bottle, I go with English uniform, just leaving the strap unpainted obviously, just getting the parts of the bottle that I can actually see. And then with that done, I paint the bits of ammo pouches, the bayonet or sword that he's got, a machete. There's also like a bit on his back in German camo medium brown. Yes, so we're going for like a worn leathery color here. And I'm just trying to get into all the different bits that I can see with my pointy brush here, just to make sure that I'm not going to make too much of a mess that I have to tidy up later on. And then for the rifle, I'm using flat earth. I mean, my recipe for painting wood remains pretty much the same for all my scales, so if you want to fast forward on this part, I wouldn't blame you, because it's, yeah, very much the same. Again, just trying to leave the metal parts unpainted just to prevent the amount of cleanup that's going to be required on this model at the end. Then for any of the metallic parts, I'm using black grey. So that's for the bayonet. That's also for parts of the weapon. That will also be for his boots and the handle of his sword or machete. I think it's like a real fancy looking sword actually, but I could be mistaken as well. It's embarrassing when I come so unprepared to something, because I just start going, oh, it's this, it could be this, could be that, but I just look at what people have got pictures of, etc., and I just paint it how I see it. I might not know exactly what I'm painting, but I paint it anyway. And then the rifle strap I paint in khaki. So if you get a chance, I'll definitely check out the Kings and Generals Pacific War series that they've got. They actually go into a lot of detail on the early part of the Pacific War, and they show you what the Dutch actually went up against, which is really cool. And then for the bottom of the machete, I'm going to go with, I paint it in brass. Could maybe get away with gold at this point too, but I've got brass, so I might as well paint it in brass. And then the hat has like a bit of brown on the outer edge, as well as on the middle part where the hat sort of balloons up. I didn't do that part, but I did do the outer edge of the hat, just to ensure that we try and get the detail as accurate as we can do. Now, it's not sculpted onto the model, but it's very easy to do, and it doesn't need to be sculpted on. Then once I've done that, I give it a wash of null oil and thinners at a 2:1 ratio. It can be a 1:1 ratio. I try and make it more of a watered down thinners, or a thin down black wash, I should say, sorry. I don't want it to be too dark, if it's too dark, it's really going to be tricky to try and paint in layers. But once that's dried, I normally give it about half an hour. I then go with Russian uniform 1x2 and German camo bright green at a 2:1 ratio again. And now I'm starting to layer. So the details on these are really easy to pick out. There's not too many of them in terms of like tiny little creases and that, where it just becomes a pain in the ass to try and paint, if I'm being completely blunt. They're exaggerated, they're easy to paint, and they make the figure pop, which I really like. These sculpts are really cool, actually. They really are fantastic. And then I go with the original mixture that we've just been using, and I add a bit of German camo beige. I add this at a 2:1 ratio, and I'm adding another layer in here, but this time I'm only capturing small little bits of the uniform, the bits that protrude out or stick out. So you can see I'm just catching the outer edge, and I'm just building up to really try and get that to pop, but without being too bright, where it's going to look exaggerated, look a bit too cartoony. Some people really like that, and if that's what you like, fantastic, but I'm trying to paint it in a bit more of a realistic color. And then I go exactly the same again. So now we've built up our layers, I want to give it a final highlight, and I use the original mixture with the German camo beige, but at a 1:1 ratio this time. So it's obviously quite a bit brighter, and now you can see that I'm really being picky at what I'm picking out. But just ensuring that the bits that are necessary to make the figure pop are being captured. So the bends in the knee, the outer edges of the uniform, any pockets that he may have, the collar, the crease lines that stick out. That's the sort of thing that you're aiming for. The rest of it can be left in those darker colors. And then for any of the straps and the pouches, etc., that you've painted in German camo medium brown, we then go over it again. With the straps, you can pretty much go over the entire thing, just don't hit the outer edges with it. You've done the hard work of giving it a wash, leave the outer edges dark, and you can just paint the middle of the strap in brown. I always find layering the fun part. I hate the base colours in terms of applying them once they've been washed. This is the part that I really enjoy. So then to give it a worn leather look, I'm going with German camo medium brown and orange brown at a 1:1 ratio. Now, if I just went with straight orange brown, it would look unrealistic. It would look orange. It just wouldn't look so nice. But this is going to be a worn leather look. So being in Indonesia and Timor and everywhere else that the Dutch East Indies fought in Asia, a lot of their equipment is going to wear really quickly. So we're going to want to try and capture that in how we paint our models. That's why I'm going with this orange brown. And you can see with the machete, or sword, I'm just building it up. And then now we go over orange brown. Now I leave orange brown to the very end because it's a very minor highlight. I don't want it to be too unrealistic. I just want it to capture those real fine details. And I apply it with a very thin amount of paint, and sometimes I might even mortar it down. We just want to take the edge away from that orange brown. We don't want it to be too orangey, if that makes sense. With that applied, we can now go over the water bottle. So we just hit it again with the original base color of English uniform, hitting most of it, just leaving the bits that are near the straps in the darker bit. And then we go with khaki grey as our last highlight, and you can see I'm just hitting the outer edges of the bottle. There's nothing too fancy here, really simple, really quick. You can pretty much do it with your eyes closed at this point. You're just literally adding on a dot here and a dot there, just to really make it stand out a bit more. Now we want to hit the areas that we painted in brown violet with, you guessed it, brown violet. So that was his gaiters and anything else that you painted in brown violet. I also painted his helmet in brown violet originally, which you didn't see at the start of this video. But once I've painted that, I then give the helmet a dry brush of brown violet, and you'll see that the helmet really starts to come to life, because where the helmet meets the rim, that rim part stays really dark, and the rest of the helmet really starts to brighten up, and it really gives it some good definition. And then to highlight the brown violet, I go with a brown violet and a German camo beige at a 1:1 ratio. Works really nicely. You can see that it's really bright, but not a super bright color. It's more of a brighter khaki, sort of light khaki color. So yeah, it works really nicely, I find anyway. It's a fantastic way of highlighting without making your color super bright where it just looks too cartoony. And that's what you want to try and avoid if you can help it. Then for the parts of the equipment that you painted in green-grey, we just copy the exact same method. So yeah, just capturing most of the detail with that original base color before we go ahead with a highlight. And then for the highlight, it's green-grey and German camo beige at a 1:1 ratio. And you can see that I'm just picking out the outer edges with that one. And then for the wood, we're going back over with that flat earth. This time, instead of trying to pick out most of the detail, I just start painting in like lines, because I'm trying to simulate wood grains now. The focus has not been that great initially in this footage, so I do apologize for that. But once you've got those flat earth lines painted, you can then go flat earth orange brown at a 2:1 ratio and start building in those lines. You could then hit it with a 1:1 ratio. You can then hit it with just orange brown. It depends how jazzy you'd like to make your wood look. You can obviously use different colors of wood, so like old wood from Vallejo is a really good option if you want to give it a worn look, for example. You can even go with like swirls opposed to lines. I've seen some really fantastic examples of it, but they're all on the various social media pages. So like the Bolt Action page, Warlord Games promoting different photos of people's miniatures as well as their own is a really good place as well for a bit of inspiration. And then once I've painted that, I go over the SMG or any parts of the medal with my black grey, and then I give it a dry brush of silver. Silver pencil is really good for this as well. It gives you a little bit more control than a dry brush, I find. But it really comes down to your personal taste. I know some people really like their metal to be really silver, so you can give it just a really good coat of silver if you want to. And then I give it a dry brush of black grey, and then the model's practically finished. Just got to base it, but we're not going to be doing that today. So that is the end of the tutorial. This is the finished product, or products I should say. A huge thank you goes out to the company Mayfooty Miniatures for sending me these sample models of their Kickstarter, as well as some other samples that you'll see from their other ranges on the channel shortly. But yeah, fantastic miniatures. I'm super psyched to be part of the Kickstarter. I definitely pledged, and I intend to add a little bit more money into that when the option becomes available. And yeah, when they come up on the website, I'll be sure to leave all that information on my various media pages. Huge thank you goes out to my Patreons. I've grown significantly this last month, so really chuffed with that. If you want to become a Patreon and join the ranks, that'd be awesome. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and you get all the paint lists, and there's some other cool little perks that you can get as well. But other than that, guys, I'll leave it here. I'd love to know what you think of the Dutch East Indies miniatures, actually. Is it something that you're going to be interested in? Definitely something a little bit different. I really did like it. But yeah, I'll stop babbling on. Really did enjoy it, guys. Leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Click that like button. Help me with the YouTube algorithm. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. Bye.